Welcome back to Haunted Frameworks. Last episode, we opened a floorboard and found more than a body. We found a pattern. We found a house haunted not by ghosts, but by history. A house where science reigned and silence killed. This time, we pull back the sheet, because if we're going to understand what really happened to Isobel, we're going to need to perform an autopsy. But not just on her body, on the forces that dissected her before she even died, on the systems that reduced her to a specimen, on the ideologies that called it progress. My name is Clementina Ramirez, and I'm your host. This is the Isobel case, episode 2, the autopsy. If you haven't watched the first episode, I urge you to go back and watch it because you'll be a little bit more informed on what's happening. The term hysteria has a long and complicated legacy, one that drips into every corner of Isobel's story. Sigmund Freud's Dora, an analysis of a case of hysteria, tried to translate the body into language. But Freud wasn't always listening to what was being said, only what he wanted to hear. In his case story, Dora's symptoms, her fainting, her silences, her outbursts, are interpreted through a male-dominated lens that assumes that women's bodies betray their minds, that they are always emotional, always unreliable, that silence is not resistance, but repression. Dianne Hunter, in her essay on Anna O, takes this further. She exposes how women weren't just misdiagnosed, they were overridden. Their stories were edited by the very people studying them. And when I read these texts and compared them to Isobel, something just clicked. She was never allowed to speak in the scientific terms of her day, and like Dora, her silence became a kind of diagnosis, an absence that men filled with their own conclusions. In 1799, the pursuit of knowledge meant carving up bodies, quite literally. The Enlightenment promised reason, but as Janet Jakobsen argues, it also carried deep contradictions. Her critique of Enlightenment feminism reveals how ideals of justice and freedom coexisted with the systematic exclusion of women and colonized people. These contradictions didn't just affect political systems. They seeped into the ethics of science itself. Stephenson's An Experiment with an Air Pump is full of these contradictions. The very men who argue for humanity's advancements are willing to exploit, ignore, and sacrifice individual humans in the process. Isobel's body becomes that sacrifice. She isn't seen as a full person, just a subject of inquiry, a mere specimen, just like Anna O, just like Dora, just like so many women who were studied, labeled, and left behind. And in this way, the autopsy becomes metaphorical, a kind of cinctured eraser, a justification for violence, hidden under the scalpel of reason. But we also can't forget the other side of this story, the women who were in science, but were simply erased from its history. Sally Gregory Kohlstedt calls it an ambiguous place. Women were assistants, collaborators, even inventors, but rarely credited. And when they were, it was only often as muses, not minds. In An Experiment with an Air Pump, Ellen might seem peripheral, but her arc suggests otherwise. She's a scientist too, just one caught in a system that tells her she's not. Her evolution from submissive wife to morally reflective, quietly radical character mirrors what Kohlstedt describes, women finding space in the scientific world, even if the world refuses to name them. The tension here between recognition and erasure brings us back to Barnett's idea of dialectic pairs, Ellen and Isobel, progress and violence, language and silence. Even binary in the play refuses to hold still. And that's the point. When Isobel's bones were uncovered, they weren't just a plot twist. They were a reckoning. What does it mean that her story had to be uncovered, literally, in order to be heard? That her value only emerged when someone could study her again. And throughout all this research, I all just kept circling back to this one idea: haunted architecture. The house as a symbol of repressed ethics, of sacrificed bodies, and of stories sealed inside floorboards. In a way, Isobel isn't just the victim. She is the house. She contains the legacy of ambition and repression. She is the record of what science chose to forget. And now, in this podcast, in our analysis and in our asking, we'll let her speak. So, what was the real crime? Was it murder, dissection, or was it silence? Was it the normalization of erasure, the elevation of ambition over empathy? This podcast isn't about solving mysteries in a traditional sense. It's about reading the crime scene that is in our own history, a long, winding corridor of unethical experiments, misdiagnosed women, and beautiful words that mask brutal omissions. So for now, we close this file, but not before asking, what do we do with the bodies that science left behind?